Hi, thank you for tuning in to What's New TV. On this episode, we'll be speaking with Mayor Steve Lee of Elk Grove, California, and find out how his town is handling the COVID 19 crisis. I'm Jeremy Ladner, and this is What's New. Mayor Lee, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
There is a bit of a time difference, of course. You are in California. We're here in Jerusalem. We're about 10 hours ahead of you, somewhere in the future. But what can you tell us right now about Elk Grove? What's the situation there on the ground?
Well, everyone is following the stay-at-home order. The situation here is, last I heard, as of the 31st of March, we have 31 cases in the city, and we have 2 deaths. So obviously, it's very serious. As many many folks have heard, our school district was the first in the nation to shut down as a result of hearing about the infection. So what we're trying to do, certainly in the city, is to try to get ahead of this. Obviously, when residents heard about the shutdown and the efforts by the city, what we saw as a result of that was a lot of folks going out and panic buying, buying toilet paper,
Sure.
buying paper products, hand sanitizers, and so these are some of the items that are limited in supply right now because the demand is so great that the supply trucks have not been able to deliver enough for the community. As I assured the community in my weekly address, the truth of it is that supply trucks are coming. We will be okay. But I like to remind people that it's important to make sure you only buy what you need and don't, buy over the top and kind of stash it away because these things are not going to be returnable after this is over. But that's our current situation.
I see. Thank you. So I understand that sadly the first death in the community was at a senior living center,
That is
Carlton Senior Living Center.
the first death in Sacramento County happens to be at a senior facility in the city of Elk Grove. We certainly it was pretty sad to hear of such, especially an elderly lady that succumbed to this infection. But hearing it in the city of Elk Grove really was pretty close to home. And I think for the Elk Grove residents, that then kind of was a good wake-up call so that people would observe some of the conditions that the health officer had put in place. I think that by virtue of us paying attention to these types of conditions and observing some of the need for community members to exercise social distancing, washing hands, covering your cough, staying away from sick people, and staying home. These are things that are the best method of preventing the spread of the virus.
Of course, these are things, unfortunately, that we've all become somewhat expert at in the past few days, listening to President Trump, Governor Cuomo, rather, and so many other medical experts who have told us again and again about flattening the curve and all of these tips for keeping ourselves healthy and, of course, the folks around us. Before we went on air, you mentioned to me that you had managed to speak with some folks in Wuhan or regarding Wuhan and both the different approach they took as far as looking at themselves as far as instead of others as potentially sick, but looking at themselves as sick and as a way to help protect others in the community. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I've had the privilege and honor of meeting some of the mayors during my travels to China, and I had a conversation with some of the government officials in southern China, and what they've shared with me is they learned from the Wuhan incident, and as a result of that, many of the orders that were put into place is that you should really just assume that you're infected. And that requires a paradigm shift. I think the tendency for people to think is, I'm not sick, everyone else potentially has been exposed and are sick. And so what it requires us to do is just make the assumption that you as an individual is probably somehow exposed or potentially sick. And your job is to protect everyone else around you, including your family members. And in southern China, when they shifted their thinking, that was able to put the virus in check. And what we saw in Wuhan was not necessarily replicated in southern China. And so that was really interesting. And I would imagine that with that, the federal government, across the world would be thinking along those lines. There's no reason why we all shouldn't be wearing masks because if we're making the assumption that we're already infected and we're protecting somebody else, the mask is the perfect way of containing droplets that would contain viruses. And so any sort of cough, even when you're speaking to somebody, the droplets could certainly transfer the virus to your neighbor, somebody standing in line, and what have you.
Right.
And so I think these are just extra precaution that it would not hurt anyone. I think for the rest of the world, it does seem culturally, I guess, supposed different than what we see in the Asian countries who wear facial masks. But I think that in these uncharted territory, I'm willing to explore these type of options, and I would certainly hope that this message gets to your viewers and community members so that they understand anything that's covering your face will probably be beneficial.
Absolutely. This will certainly, well, I'm not going to make that assumption, but I'm going to say I assume that this will almost certainly change the way that we live post COVID-19.
Yeah.
As far as social distancing, as far as being aware of the potential spread of viruses and such, it's going to be hard to imagine that we're not, at least for quite some time, all going to be very very aware of door handles and elevator buttons and all sorts of things like that, as well as
Right.
as those weeks after things sort of start to get back to normal, when you hear someone next to you kind of cough or sneeze and you whip your head around and look and think, my goodness, it will be difficult not to immediately think of what comes next.
Yeah, and I think that's just natural. But I mean, some of these things that they're recommending, right? These health agencies are things that we should be doing already. And the strange thing is, I have to often wonder. Now there's, I see a lot of the empty shelves of soap as well,
Yep.
and I wonder. So we weren't washing our hands before, and all of a sudden now we're washing our hands. And so, I mean, these are things that I think provides us an opportunity to pause and to really examine, how important hygiene is and
Right.
what we should be. And so, I think the other interesting thing here is that by virtue of, everyone that can work from home, who is working from home, now it opens the possibility of that options of working from home. Can you just imagine the environmental impact that would have if we just have people work from home and only go meet with people when it's necessary? I think that would be pretty groundbreaking. We can, certainly do a lot in
Right.
pollution.
Absolutely. It's remarkable the fact that so much time has been spent driving back and forth to work. You think about all those rush hours with the packed highways and how much time is spent, how much gasoline is burned. And suddenly, for now weeks locally here in Israel, and I know, of course, in Europe and around the world, things have changed. People are working from home. People are managing to get by, and companies are still providing services. If even a portion of that can continue when this is all over, imagine the environmental impact that will have. And I know that that's something that the residents of California are certainly very sensitive to.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
What about local businesses in Elk Grove? How are they handling things? I would imagine that restaurants, takeout, grocery stores are all doing relatively well. What can folks do to help these local businesses, perhaps in this very difficult time?
So they are hurting. There's no doubt about that. What we are doing with the city is we're having a page that's being developed. I believe it's live already. But what it does is it collects all of the resources, including the Small Business Administration and the loans that are available for small businesses. But some of the efforts that we're doing locally is partnership with Visit Elk Grove and the Chamber of Commerce to push out and encourage the community to dine in our local restaurants at least 3 times a week to keep it going. And even though the restaurants are physically closed to the public, but you can certainly order for pickup. And what is important here is this will pass, but we want to make sure that businesses are sustained so that they continue to be open, keep the doors open beyond COVID-19.
Absolutely. Okay, good, good. I want to bring up a map here. Here we go. This is a map of the U.S. It's posted by theguardian.com. Right now, the numbers by states have New York State at the top, unfortunately, with more than 90,000 confirmed cases, more than almost 2,500 deaths, sadly. New Jersey right after that, and California third. What do you see coming next? I would imagine you've been privy to some information and some emergency closed-door meetings. Can you give us any idea of what to expect in the next couple of weeks as far as this curve goes that we keep talking about, keep hearing about, flattening the curve? When it hits, I'm gonna guess that the worst, sadly, is yet to come. Have you heard anything from the state level, from the federal level, about what might be coming next?
Right, and I think that's a good rule of thumb is that we're not at the peak yet, and that's why it's so important for community to obey the order by the health officer is to really just stay at home, and we have to brace ourselves because I am concerned that the peak. What I'm hearing is that it's going to be between April the 15th through May the 15th. And so we're going to see a lot more cases. So that being the case, we have to make genuine efforts in making sure that the community understands this. Some of the efforts by the police chiefs of this region and also the sheriff is to educate the community. And so they're working very hard. The men and women are out there informing people to make sure you observe social distancing if you decide to go and take a walk, but certainly don't be playing any team sports in the parks. And in partnership with the Parks and Rec, they've closed down all of the team facility in the parks. The playground, all of that's been shut down, and we're anticipating that the peak is yet to come, and so that's what I'm consistently hearing. The only good news that I've heard that is promising is that a lot of the businesses. This situation is different than what we saw with the recession, in that this is generated by government telling everyone to stay home, and that does not necessarily affect the fact that there are people who are ready to spend money. And so, from the economists who shared this with our the regional economic briefing, his anticipation is that people will be itching to spend the money. And so once this passes, then you'll see a surge of spending, and then we should be returned back to normal by the end of the year. So that's a bit of good news that I'm hopeful that would come into fruition. It would be a fact. What initially did have me worry is seeing businesses just decrease. And my fear is seeing a recession similar to that of which we saw before.
Yeah, I from what I've been hearing, we can almost certainly expect a bounce once everyone gets the green light to get back to normal, to go out, to go shopping, to take those trips that have been postponed. Hopefully, that will be by the end of summer. Let's all hope. But unfortunately, the longer this goes on, the worse it is for businesses big and small who rely on their employees. But unfortunately, if they're not selling, have to let their employees go. So hopefully, this we'll see an end in sight in the next 4 to 8 weeks, and that will be something that businesses can hold on to and find a way to retain these employees, not to let them go. Thank you, Mayor, so much for your time. I certainly appreciate it. My thoughts are with the citizens of Elk Grove, wishing all of them the very best. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
My pleasure. And thanks to all of you for watching. We certainly appreciate it. If you like the show, let us know. Like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit that bell so you get notified of all of our new episodes. And comments, please. We really like your comments. Leave them in the comment section down below. If you've got any additional questions for Mayor Lee, the comment section is a great place to leave them. We'll make sure he gets them. Until next time, I'm Jeremy Ladner, and this is What's New.